Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm pleased to introduce Jim Bogart as our speaker. 12 years ago, I met Jim Bogart for this very same subject. I was honored to be selected to be in the first inaugural Ag Knowledge class, which is something that the Ag Education, is it the foundation? And Hardin Foundation put on in April of 2007. And it was 9 sessions, 9 Fridays throughout the year. And Jim Bogart was a speaker, and he spoke about ag and immigration. So when it came up that the league wanted to have a program about that, I said, I know, right, the man. And here he is with us today. Jim, as you read in your voter, is an attorney. He's the counsel for Growers and Shippers Association based in Salinas. He's been with them for 20 years. Is that right? He's a native Californian. He has 4 Jim Bogarts in his heritage: father, grandfather, great-great-grandfather, who were all dentists. So he can talk to farmers a lot about teeth, I suppose. Cow's teeth and pig's teeth, I don't know. But you'll really, I know you'll learn a lot from him today. Please welcome Jim Bogart.
Well, thank you, Kayla, for that kind introduction. And in case anybody's wondering, why isn't he a dentist? 2 words: organic chemistry. Yeah, it steered me quickly into the law. But anyway, again, thank you, and happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I can think of far more enjoyable ways than you could spend your afternoon listening to me talk about this subject, but I appreciate your interest. And it's something that I've been actively engaged in for a long, long time. And it's, as you know, it's a very timely discussion. It's a very important discussion. I mean, Congress has started the debate today. I mean, as we sit here and as we speak. It's a complex subject. It's a very emotional subject. It's a very passionate subject. It's a very political subject. There's a lot of nuances involved in it, and it's far too complex for me to go into in any great detail with you because of time constraints. So what I think I'm going to do is just kind of give you the 30,000-foot overview and give you a flavor of this important subject of immigration reform and how it impacts agriculture. And most important, and I encourage you to write down any questions you may have. I mean, I prefer an interactive discussion. I don't really like, doing all the talking, or I certainly love it when I can deviate from a script. So I guess by way of setting the table, I think most of you out there know that the last major piece of legislation passed by Congress and signed into law was the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. Ronald Reagan was president, and I'll tell you, I was around for that. I was engaged in that effort, and really 10 years into IRCA, Immigration Reform and Control Act, we in agriculture realized we had a problem, that there were some unanticipated difficulties that we in agriculture were encountering, specifically regard to the agricultural workforce. Under IRCA, they had 2 classifications: seasonal agricultural workers and replenishment agricultural workers. And whatever definition we applied, we realized we don't have enough of them. We don't have enough of either one of them. And so we, in the industry, and myself in particular, and to show you how old I am and how long I've been working, I remember talking about this stuff with Congressman Leon Panetta. Okay, so it goes back a way. But nothing was done. We continued to encounter problems, specifically with regard to, we started seeing shortages over labor. This is not something that happened overnight or just in the last year, or with the election of the current president. I mean, this is something that we've been dealing with for a long, long time. And about, I guess, maybe 10 years or so ago, we really started making an effort, and there appeared to be an interest in Congress of doing something about the immigration problem. The crisis, the ag labor crisis in particular, is ongoing, and it's getting worse, the labor shortage. And you know, it's interesting because in fact, I think I was telling Kayla, the last time I was here at this location, it was about 3 months ago, and I was asked by the American Association of University Women to talk about immigration reform and the ag labor shortage, and I wish I had a dime for every, you know, speaking engagement I had, or thank you, or op-ed piece I've written, or articles I've written, or media interviews, or testimony before congressional committees or legislative committees. It is a subject that I've been asked to speak about a lot. And as an aside, this is kind of interesting because every year the Grower Shipper Association surveys its members as to what are the most important issues to you. And number one for the last several years has been, you know, the labor shortage and immigration reform, and a lot of issues associated with labor that we can get into later on if we have enough time. But it's interesting. I've got a colleague that I work closely with in the office, Abby Taylor Silva, who maybe some of you know. And Abby works her tail off on water issues and food safety issues. But every year, you know, it's labor number one. Well, that's my area of quote unquote expertise. So I said to Abby one day, gee, I hope you don't feel shortchanged or anything, that, you know, it's always labor number one. It's not self-preservation or anything. She says, oh no, Jim, you know, it says, actually, I feel good about it because it makes me feel like I'm solving the problems that I'm working on. And I said, I never really thought about that before quite that way, but you know, you're right. And then it's interesting because I've heard other speakers talk back in DC or other locations, and we've been working on this issue for so long, and we haven't made any headway, that it's like, oh my God, what do we have to show for our efforts? But let's talk a few about some numbers first of all. I mean, this is a major issue, particularly with respect to agriculture. But you've heard the numbers, and I don't even know if these are real, but supposedly there's 12 million undocumented people in the United States. We figure 10% of those are in agriculture, so you know that's give or take 1.2 million people nationally. Probably 50% of those, and if these, you know, I just say these are numbers that we're hearing. It's all anecdotal, but 50% of those 1.2 are probably here in California. So we're probably talking about 500,000 workers, and that are falsely documented. And let me tell you this, is that agriculture has been very upfront about this, is that, you know, we understand that probably up to 75% of our workforce may be falsely documented, but we want access to a legal and stable workforce. We want our workers to be here legally. We want them to be here in sufficient numbers. We want them to be able to work, you know, openly and come out of the shadows. And so we've made no pretense about it. We want to be part of the solution. You know, we don't want to be part of the problem. But a few more things that you should consider. The ag worker population, like all of us, is aging, okay? They're getting older, okay? And they're not replenishing themselves in the numbers that they're retiring. So the pool is shrinking. the number of field and crop workers in the United States fell by at least 146,000, or more than 20% between 2002 and 2014. A report from the Pew Research Center found that 140,000 more Mexicans left the United States than came into the United States between 2009 and 2014. Labor costs account for 48% of fruits and 35% of costs for vegetables. That's nationwide. The percentage is higher. The labor costs are higher here in California, but that's a national figure. Nationally, we need between 1.5 and 2 million workers during peak season. The current system, the H-2A temporary guest worker program run by the Department of Labor, the current temporary guest worker system does not address the replenishment of these workers. In 2017, the H-2A program processed 200,000 temporary guest worker visas in agriculture, but this provides less than 4% of hired workers needed in agriculture. So we're going to get into this discussion a little bit more about this replacement of the guest worker program. And then one final stat here. In 2012, labor shortages on farms led to $3.3 billion in missed gross domestic product growth and $1.3 billion lost in farm income. So those are the numbers. Those are the stats. I mean, obviously, eye-opening, jaw-dropping, whatever you want to description you want to put on it. But it's more serious here in California, primarily and especially here on the Central Coast because of our crop mix. The crops we grow here and harvest here and pack here are very labor-intensive. Very strawberries, lettuces, leafy greens, artichokes, cauliflower, vegetables, that kind of stuff. You just can't replace easily by mechanization. It's spurred innovation, technology, mechanization. We can talk about that later on. But it's a very labor-intensive industry. And we rely upon our workers very, very much. They play an important role. And I think, as I noted before, the labor shortage here on the Central Coast, it's real, it's acute, it's severe, and it's getting worse. It gets worse and worse every year. This is not a problem that's just correcting itself over time. I mean, there's ground that's been taken out of production, especially in strawberries. Growers are making planting decisions based on maybe less labor-intensive crops, and other techniques that they're trying to employ to counterbalance the labor shortage. So, as I said, no surprise, labor shortage and immigration reform has been identified by our members and everywhere. It's not just here on the Central Coast, it's statewide. The Western growers, California Farm Bureau, it's the #1 issue for them. We have national organizations like the United Fresh Produce Association based in Washington, D.C. It's the #1 issue nationwide for them. In fact, there's a Government Relations Council meeting going on right now back in D.C. that I couldn't make it back for, but they're on the Hill right now making House visits, and this is #1 on the list of issues that they want to discuss with legislators and administration officials back there. Anybody remember the show Columbo? Peter Falk, right? Actually, I met Peter Falk when I'm going back to my USC days when I realized I wasn't going to be a dentist. For a brief moment of time, I was actually recruited to apply to enroll in the USC Graduate School of Cinema, which has produced Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Ron Howard was a couple years behind me at SC. Well, anyway, so to get my grade point average back up after having flunked organic chemistry, I started taking these cinema classes. And the one that everybody wanted to get into was Cinema 190. Well, as part of our curriculum, we were charged with going out and writing a term paper on some kind of, somebody in the film business, television, whatever. So I said, well, I like Columbo, and it's a great show. And so I interviewed Peter Falk, actually, a really interesting guy. And he's just like he was in the show. I mean, he's really disheveled and stuff, but a really brilliant guy. But if you remember Columbo, remember he'd be walking away from the suspect. He'd say, oh, just one more thing, right? Well, I was preparing my remarks, and I said, oh, just one more thing. But it's an important thing to remember. You need to know against this whole backdrop of labor is that by the year 2050, California farmers are going to have to produce twice as much food with half the resources we have now. And one of the most important, if not the important resource, in addition to water and energy, is labor, right? And that labor force has already been reduced, but twice as much food with half the resources 30 years from now. And then, but I was at another meeting before this one, and I thought, oh my God, it's another Columbo moment, because here's just one more thing. So I wrote this down in the last hour. Oh, that's right. You got to understand, and what I make clear to everybody is there's the rest of the United States, and then there's California, okay? And we can get into that more, because it actually leads to some real interesting and healthy discussion. In addition to this issue of labor shortages and preserving and maintaining our agricultural workforce, you've got the sanctuary cities issue. California is now a sanctuary state. And one of the first things the legislature did, and the Governor Brown signed into law right after the election of the current president, it just is what it is. It's not a political statement. But they passed and signed into law Assembly Bill 450. And that bill, that law now, makes it, it mandates that employers in this state, before allowing ICE or Department of Homeland Security or any other immigration enforcement agency from coming onto the work site, you got to have a judicial warrant or a subpoena, and you got to get that. But then you need to post a notice that ICE is here, and that notice has to be posted. That information has to be delivered to all the workers, that they're here. And you don't do that, the employer doesn't do that, they're subject to hefty, hefty fines. My point is this, is that California ag is in the crosshairs. We're caught in the crossfire. My members are saying, well, wait a minute. So we're violating California law if we obey federal law? And like I said, this is not any kind of political, agenda that I'm getting at here. It's how do we deal with this, And it's a very highly charged, partisan, political, ideological atmosphere that we live in, and we're in the middle, trying to do the right thing and to protect the workers that we have here. But that was the one more thing. So let's talk about immigration reform and agriculture. We've been close a couple of times to achieving something in Congress. I think 2006, remember George W. Bush was in office, came real close in 2006. That was scuttled at the last minute. We're just right there at the precipice, and then about 2013, three or 4 years ago, we were real close. There was a bipartisan bill in Congress that had the support. The president was ready to sign it, and at the last minute, partisanship kind of got a hold of things, and it went sideways on us. So here we are. And comprehensive immigration reform, it's got a lot of moving parts, and I'll mention a few here. One is the system itself. Numbers. How many people do we let in? What are the policies, procedures for letting them in? Certain time frames that have to be followed. So it's the system itself. How do we allow immigrants to come into this country and stay in this country in an orderly legal process? So that's more procedural type of stuff. And then, of course, you've got the enforcement, right? The enforcement wing. Border security, the wall, electronic verification, E-Verify. Most of you have heard about that, where, person presents, some states have already got this going. We've kind of pushed it off in the ag sector successfully, but some states have mandated for an employer before they can hire anybody is they check that social security number, they contact Department of Homeland Security, they cross-check that number, and if the red light goes on, say that number's invalid, you can't hire that person, okay? Well, there's been a movement by some in Congress that, it's all about enforcement, okay? And employer sanctions, okay? It's okay, the current law says if you know or you should know that somebody is in your employ illegally, you violated the law, and you're subject to hefty fines and penalties, and it's a real concern, especially in agriculture. Everybody knows that a large percentage of those workers are falsely documented. So it creates fear not just among the workers, but among the employers too. If ICE shows up and half or your entire workforce in the field is deported, that's scary. But that's the other component, is the enforcement. And then you have people that are saying, well, what about the pathway to citizenship? Whatever you call it, whatever A word you want, amnesty, adjustment of status, whatever. And but it's important, at least for us in agriculture, that, and I'll get into this in more detail, that one of the components of any kind of reform package has to confer legal status on workers in agriculture. And then you've got DACA, right? The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Okay, it's interesting because that's another thing that's into the mix. But I've had this conversation with Jimmy Panetta and Kevin McCarthy, Republicans, Democrats. I said, this is a real opportunity, really. To me, this is, here it is on a silver platter, because this could be the vehicle, to address these DACA kids, who I don't think anybody really wants to deport. Well, maybe one or two people now that I think about it, but but it's emotional, and this is something that there could be some give and take. There can be some real give and take. You got to hitch up your britches and get in there and negotiate and compromise. But this is where you may be able to do something. But whatever you do with the DACA kids, and maybe you give a little on enforcement, we need ag to be a part of those discussions and a part of that solution. And like I said, ag is very unique, very unique. We stand apart from other industries when you think about it, because, and if there's one thing that bugs me is when I hear farm workers referred to as unskilled. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are hardworking, they're experienced, and they're very skilled at what they do. And they, and they do work that has been proven time and time again that U.S.-born workers just will not do. And I'll give you a great example of it. In the state of Georgia, 3 or 4 years ago, they were ready to harvest the peaches, and of course, they didn't have enough workers to hire to harvest the peaches. So the farmers go to the governor of Georgia, who may have been Sonny Perdue, who's now the Secretary of Agriculture. Secretary Perdue kind of gets it, because I think he was governor when this happened. And they said, we just need workers. We can't recruit them from the the Employment Development Department or anybody here, and we don't have our foreign-born workers or even our regular workers, because they've all flown the coop because they're afraid of deportation. and we got to get those peaches harvested. So the governor said, well, wait a minute, I got a great idea. He says, we've got all these inmates in the penitentiary. I'm going to release them on a work furlough to go harvest the peach crop. Within 2 or 3 days, the inmates said, send us back to the ball and chain. I kid you not. They didn't use those words exactly, but that's what it amounted to. We would prefer being locked up in the cells, a ball and chain, than do this. It's too hard. So that's my point, is that these exceptional people that work in our fields and packing sheds, processing plants, but most especially in the fields, they do work that no others can perform and no others will perform, and we're dependent upon them. We can't exist without them. So AG's ask in this whole debate is simple. We need a long-term solution that provides agriculture with a legal and stable workforce. And there's two components to that. Number one is immediately confer, or at least have a pathway to legal status for the workers that we have here, okay? Because they're experienced, they're part of our communities, they've been here for a long, long time, and they're valuable contributors to our industry here. So we want legal status for the people that are here. But as I indicated before, that pool of workers is shrinking because they're aging and they're just not, their kids aren't getting into it, or they're not being replenished in the numbers that they're leaving agriculture. So we've had this program that's run by the United States Department of Labor, and for agriculture it's called H-2A. It's a temporary guest worker visa program. But that program is broken beyond repair. It just, we don't get the numbers of workers that we need when we need them, and the fruits on the trees or the crops in the ground, they're not going to last there forever. They got to be harvested when they're ready to be harvested. It's litigious, it's cumbersome. So we just said, can we scrub this and then rebuild something that actually works for agriculture? And so that's the second component, is replace the current program with something better. And that needs to be done, because we need that or whatever the temporary guest worker visa program to augment or supplement our regular workforce here. And that's the safety net. That is the safety net that we in agriculture have to have. Are we in support of protecting the DACA kids? Yeah, absolutely. Are we in favor of border security? But we can't support an enforcement-only approach without the safety net of legal status for the workers we have here and fixing this guest worker visa program. And this is just my opinion. I've kind of departed from some of my colleagues in agriculture, but I've always felt that ag is so unique that what we do here and the fruits and vegetables and the food supply that we provide, that should resonate with members of Congress. And maybe we should think about going it alone, because we've got to put food on the table for everybody's got to eat, right? I think people would want to do something about that. And since it's so labor intensive, maybe we got to do that. And actually, Senator Dianne Feinstein, I think it was around five or 6 years ago, introduced the Ag Jobs Bill, which focused on that. And then just last year or so, she reintroduced something similar to it. And it's really focused on agriculture. And Jimmy Panetta was a co-sponsor of that bill on the House side, but it just never gains traction. It never gained any kind of traction in Congress. And so I guess I'm just a realist, even though I think it makes sense that ag stand alone. It hasn't proven successful. Okay, so I've been down this road a couple of times. I don't think that's going to work. And then here's another opinion, is that a piecemeal approach isn't going to work. I mean, it's just too toxic in D.C., okay? You got the hardline enforcement folks, and, just deport everybody that's not here legally. And then you've got others that say, no, the first thing we got to do is maybe just DACA as standalone, or amnesty, or do something about, people that we can confer some kind of legal status, and let's do that first. That's not going to happen. I mean, one side won't let the other do it. Nothing will get to 60 votes in the Senate. Nothing's going to get like that's going to get to 218 votes in the House. And so kind of a piecemeal approach isn't going to work. I mean, really, if you just say, well, let's just do the wall. I mean, that's not going to work. In fact, actually, the wall or E-Verify is even a better example. Do E-Verify. Let's just do that little piece of it. Don't do anything. I mean, if you do that, ag is in a worse position now than it is, in a worse position than it is today. And it's the worst it's ever been today. And you're proposing by this approach to make it even worse tomorrow. So there's a lot of moving parts. But as I mentioned, debate has begun in Congress. And if I heard the reports right, I think Senate Majority Leader said, well, let's start by proposing this bill that's going to crack down on sanctuary cities. Well, that gets discussion off to a good start, doesn't it? Right? I mean, that's like basically, it's either I know the response that would come from many members of Congress, and it's just that's not the way you engage in discussions and meaningful dialogue on a subject that's as important as this. I mean, let's actually maybe try to find some things that we can agree on, and this is when I go back to my ag discussion, but I think it's going to be some kind of hybrid thing that comes out of it. But, I've been proven wrong before, but nobody's just going to get a one-sided deal. You've got a lot of things on the table right now. You got President Trump's 4 pillars, right? Which is let's confirm, legalization and path to citizenship for all the DACA kids, 1.8 million of them. But to that, you got the wall, and then limits on family-based immigration, which, he refers to as chain migration, which pisses off a lot of people just using that term. But, it's just like, can't we just talk in terms that don't incite and inflame people, and that's on both sides. And then the 4th pillar is replace the diversity diversity visa letters with a merit-based system. So you got President Trump's deal in there, and then House Judiciary Committee Chair Bob Goodlatte out of Virginia. He has a bill that's there's 2 bills really, but his ag guest worker bill is part of this. I forget what he's titled his bill, but in a nutshell, his bill addresses all these things. The problem is, and this is just very brief in generalization, it's light, very light on the DACA stuff, and it's heavy, extra heavy on the enforcement stuff. And so that's not going to fly. And then I haven't looked at it real closely, but Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, and Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, have their version of bill. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot that's there now, probably a lot of stuff that's going to come in the next few days or weeks. But I would guess that, let me put it this way, I'm hopeful that some kind of hybrid comes out of this thing, okay? And whatever this hybrid bill is, it's got to address agriculture's needs. And I guess the $64,000 question is there a willingness to negotiate? Is there a willingness to compromise? on both sides. I mean, it's what I do for a living, for God's sakes. I mean, lawyers do it. I negotiate union contracts all the time. It's give and take. It's what we do in our businesses. You know, we do what's best to move the ship forward. But I'm telling you, I mean, I've been at this gig for 40 years. I've never seen it more polarized. It's worse. And thank God, I mean, I got a couple more years left, and then I'm retiring. But I don't need this, assuming I don't die in office first. But it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating because you have ideological and political agendas that are trumping everything that really needs to be done. And people get emotional, people get passionate, and I mean, hey, I'm all for passion and emotion, but when people get like that, they don't listen to each other. You know, they're screaming at each other, and it's unfortunate. So we'll see. I mean, I've been down this road before. I've worked hard in the past. I'm working hard now. I'll continue to work hard in the future. So some final thoughts and takeaways, and we can get to your questions. But ag, as I said, is a very labor-intensive industry, which relies very much on an experienced and skilled workforce. We cannot produce the nation's food and fiber without workers to help us harvest, grow, and pack this. These workers do not take jobs away from or displace U.S.-born workers. And we cannot afford to offshore our food supply like we've offshored our oil. I mean, can you imagine what the food safety standards are in China or the worker protection standards are in Guatemala? I mean, we have the highest standards here. And remember, it results in what? A nutritious, abundant, affordable food supply. We spend more per dollar on food than any other nation in the world. And it's just, there's too much at risk. We can't afford, in terms of food safety and security, to produce our fruits and vegetables anywhere else. And those crops are going to be harvested by a foreign workforce. The question is, are they going to be harvested here in the United States, or are they going to be harvested in some other country?
You may want to take a break. We have quite a few exciting questions to ask you.
Well,
so.
I want to see them first.
And Janet brought it to my attention that as Legal Women Voters, we have a position on immigration, which I will read. Immigration policies should promote reunification of immediate families, meet economic, business, and employment needs, and be responsive to those facing political persecution or humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
So I will turn.
I wouldn't
this
dare
over.
disagree with it, I'll tell you, standing up here in front of I mean, I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. Hey, but before we take the next question, this is your takeaway, and it's good to see. That was great that you've developed a position. Get involved, stay engaged, talk to your member of Congress, your senators, anybody that you can influence. I mean, write a letter to the editor of the paper. I mean, everybody can do something. And honestly, it's more compelling coming from citizens than a paid political hack like me. No, honestly, I mean, I want farmers and farm workers telling the story rather than an association executive like me. It's far more moving and compelling and effective. So get engaged. We care about agriculture. We care about farm workers. We care about our fruits and vegetables. We want to maintain a healthy, nutritious lifestyle. We need agriculture, and we need workers and immigration reform. Okay, now let's get some questions.
The questions are all over the place, and we have 15 minutes, so I'll just start with the one I got first. An economist's friend always says that higher wages would supply the necessary workforce. If the farmers can't afford this, they shouldn't be in business. Well, you're supposed to ask a question. I did this on purpose. That's not what we want. We don't want a statement. I was going to say a lecture.
But I'll be happy
you
to
can
address
comment
that.
on
Oh,
this.
yeah, because nothing could be further from the truth. Wages have risen rapidly over the last 5 years, and California has the highest ag wages in the nation, and the Central Coast of California has the highest wages in California. And it's not minimum wage. I mean, which just went up to $11 an hour. I mean, if you have H-2A workers, you have to pay what's known as the adverse effect wage rate for entry-level positions. That's like $13.50 an hour right now. Here on the Central Coast, even those that don't employ, the average kind of base wage is $15 an hour, say for weeding crews. Harvesting crews make $25, $30 an hour, and those wages have gone up because the number of workers available has declined, so growers are bidding against each other. So wages are going up and up and up and up, and the workforce has shrunk, the pool has shrunk, and it certainly hasn't attracted any domestically born workers to agriculture. So that's not true.
Next question. Do most of the seasonal workers want to stay here, or do they want to go home to their families?
It's a combination, honestly. I know a lot of companies that employ workers that stay here. You know, they've been here, not just working for the company, but they've been here in the community for 20, 30 years. But with harvesting crews and more seasonal work, those workers, what I hear is that they generally want to work here as much as possible, earn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and go home, and then come back. So,
If you were king, what would our labor force laws concerning immigrant labor look like?
what's that?
What you've told us already. I
Well, you
guess.
lost me when if I were
If
king.
you were king.
Yeah.
Well, you are king. I'm going to go to the
I
other
don't
side.
understand the question.
What do you suggest to protect ag land, urban sprawl, and city land grab? If you were king. I crown you king.
Yeah, there you go. Not quite sure how this relates to the topic of the day, but I'll take a stab at it. Keep agriculture viable. You know, keep it so that the best use of the land is agricultural production on that land. I mean, that's what sustainability means. It's people, produce, planet. Okay, it's about people. And people profits planet, actually. It's not people produce planet. So I might throw that fourth B in there. But you got to be profitable. You got to stay in business. And if ag continues to be a viable industry and it's possible for growers, shippers, packers to make a living and employ farm workers that make a decent living in doing that, that's what's gonna keep ag viable and keep it from being paved over or urbanized.
Trump constantly defames immigrants. He's trying to slash even skilled immigration significantly. Has the ag business brought in any specific bills, legislation that we can, as citizens, could support?
Yeah, no, we have, and we've presented those to Chairman Goodlatte and the House Committee, Jimmy Panetta. All of ag's concerns have been expressed numerous times over years and years and years. And as I indicated before, it's a pretty simple fix, right? I mean, confer legal status on the workers we have here and give us access to a viable guest worker program that allows us to supplement our domestic workforce with agricultural employees from foreign countries in the sufficient numbers and at the time that we need them. But I mean, I don't like it does not help matters when anyone kind of inflames the situation with rhetoric, inflammatory remarks, that doesn't help things. But that doesn't stop agriculture from fighting the good fight. We've met with administration officials, and and there are people within the administration that understand it. They get it. It's just, can they get through to the boss? But the president can't do this alone. The president has to wait for Congress to pass some kind of legislation for him to sign. So it's up to Congress to get it. But that said, yeah, it doesn't help with you get to this inflammatory language, because it just pisses people off, and they say, well, the hell with him. I'm not going to do anything that he wants, right? And so it doesn't put people in a position where they want to work together and compromise or negotiate or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
Are you in favor of the wall?
We haven't really taken a position on the wall specifically in agriculture. This is what we do. Maybe because we're cowards, I don't know. We want to keep the we don't want to tell you what we're opposed to. We want to tell you what we're in favor of. And so let's focus on agriculture. This is what we're in favor of. We're in favor of agriculture. We're in favor of perpetuating, maintaining, expanding a safe, nutritious, affordable food supply for the people of this country and the people of the world. That's what we want, okay? And, but honestly, no, if we need legal immigration reform, legal remedies.
Locally, Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito counties, is there a well-organized coalition of growers currently lobbying in Washington, D.C.? If so, please describe the organization.
Yeah.
I think you have.
I think
already.
I touched upon that. Yeah, are we organized? We're very organized. The question is, have we been effective? And I would probably have to say, to date, no. We haven't been successful, but we are organized.
Well, and I think it said in our voter that you represent the Central Coast, Salinas, Monterey County, Santa Cruz County,
Right.
San Benito County, the
Right.
Grower Shipper Association.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what we have done on the Grower Shipper Association end is that I've got a very effective partnership and alliance with organized labor on this, worker advocacy groups, church groups, and other organizations that many times we don't see eye to eye on. But when it comes to agriculture and jobs and protecting people that are making a valuable contribution to the industry and to the community, because honestly, like I said, ag advocating on its own behalf, that hasn't been all that great. And not just in the immigration context, but even on county general plans and stuff. I'll routinely call up the UFW or the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council or the Teamsters saying, you know what, this is about jobs too. This is about harvesting. Housing. These are issues that your members should be concerned about. And when I have the unions standing up there with me, my message resonates a little bit more. But a lot of my colleagues say he's consorting with the enemy, Well, what, bridge on the River Kwai? Remember Alec Guinness, and he's building the bridge, and he's tied in with the Japanese commandant, and the guy's looking at him through the binoculars. He's going, oh my God, he's leading them right to it. Our own man. I get that sometimes. What are you sitting down with the UFW for, or community advocacy groups? Because, this is stuff we can all agree upon.
Will the emerging local cannabis industry have an impact on immigration issues?
God, I hope so. Whatever works, Yeah, if there's a lot of money, I know there is, and sometimes that works. So, I can't say. I don't know. I need to learn a lot more about the emerging cannabis industry. From what I know, it's not really a labor-intensive industry, but there's a lot of dollars associated with that. And, yeah, right. But we'll see. Like I said, if it helps, I'm in favor of it.
Has the ag industry ever thought of a strike?
Have we ever?
We would go hungry.
Have we ever
Thought of a strike?
thought of a strike? Yeah. Yeah, honestly, we just said, let's just take this ground out of production. Not so much on, well, it could affect the immigrant, but what are you going to do? I mean, sacrifice the nation's food supply and fruits and vegetables and the health of you know, kids and that kind of stuff. But, you know, I've heard that same discussion say, well, what about, you know, this will get us more for our product from the Walmarts and the Costcos and our customers, you know? I mean, in order to pay our workers more and jump through all these regulatory hoops that we have to that cost us money, you know, we need to get more for our product. So maybe to drive that point home, maybe we just take this ground out of production and don't give these big customers anything. They don't have access to it. And then our prices will go up. And so I mean, extreme times call for extreme measures, but I would not want to see us resort to that. Then we're no better than, you know, a lot of others that criticize us.
I think you answered this in your data in the beginning. The question is, what percentage of ag workers are illegal? And you did say that.
Well,
and I wrote
like
it
I
down.
said, it's anecdotal, but it's probably between 50 and 75%. And I don't like the term undocumented. They're falsely documented. I mean, any employer, not just ag employers, the I-9 form, right? They have to present you proof of identity, like a driver's license, and then proof of legal work status, right? Like a social security card. You have to do this. And if the documents on their face reasonably appear to be genuine, you must accept them. If you inquire further, then the employer has committed an unfair labor practice and can be sued. So we see the documentation. So they're not obviously false, but that's why falsely documented is a better term to use than undocumented.
Can ag use, is it HIB visas? Did you say that?
H-1
H-1 visas. Can ag use H-1B?
Is that the high tech, you know?
Well, that's where it's used a lot now.
Right, up in the Silicon Valley. Well, you know, it's conceivable moving forward, because this is one thing I should have touched upon, is what this labor shortage has spurred us toward is mechanization, innovation, technology, that kind of stuff. So if those workers possess skills that are going to be needed to operate a automated harvester or can design one or something, it's possible. We'd tap into that source too. Yeah.
Our final question, and our timing is great. Our existing workers.
You just made me think of something. Johnny Carson, remember Karnak the Magnificent? Remember he put the question to his head?
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I hold in my hand the final question. Remember? And the crowd would burst into
Kayla
applause.
and Jim show.
Karnak would say, well, you know, Karnak says, may a camel, greet you on your head or something. So.
Our existing workforce, our existing workers having children who then go into ag.
Not really. Certainly not in the numbers that they used to. And that's the way it should be. I mean, who doesn't aspire to a higher paying job and an easier job and a safer job? And I mean, I want to see these kids not just move into higher paying and safer jobs, but get an education.
Get an education.
Yeah. So the answer is no.
Probably not.
No.
Well, thank you, Jim. We couldn't have been better informed, entertained, and we thank you so much. You didn't miss a beat.
Thank you very much.